This is episode 43 of the Construction Leading Edge podcast over at constructionleadingedge.com. Recently voted one of the top 400 podcasts for construction business leaders and owners. All right, actually, that's not true. But what is true is my name is Todd DeWalt. I'm your host. And my job here is to help you grow your business, grow your leadership skills, and grow your income. While this podcast may not be on the list of the top 400 podcasts in construction because maybe that list doesn't exist, but our guest today does come from one of the largest contractors in the country. He is from DPR Construction, and they are actually on the top 400 list from ENR. They're number 21. DPR Construction has 2,600 employees, and they did around $2.9 billion with a B in revenue in 2015. His name is Guy Sanders. His expertise is in talent management. He's a project executive, East Coast talent manager for DPR Construction. He's been with the company since 1997. I interviewed Guy, and we talked about some really interesting subjects, including DPR's philosophy, which is who we build is as important as what we build. We talk about the importance of culture in a company, about people growth, and then some things that will help you if you are a subcontractor who's interested in developing relationships and getting work with large companies like DPR Construction. We talk about some strategies for doing that, some tips, and also some mistakes that subcontractors make when trying to get work and develop relationships with large general contractors. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Guy Sanders from DPR Construction. Enjoy. All right, Guy Sanders, thanks for being on the podcast today. How's it going for you?
Great. Thank you, Todd, for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about your background. Can you share with the folks listening who you work for, what you do, and what you're most focused on these days?
Sure. So I've been working with DPR Construction for about 18 years, been in the industry about 25, and most of my career at DPR Construction has been in the operations, building buildings, executing projects, hands-on portion of our business. In the last 4 years, I've been really focusing in a whole different role that's sort of made up. We sort of crafted it, and it continues to be evolved as it relates to growing our talent and growing our senior people. So I spend majority of my day sort of focused on our senior leadership in certain portions of our company around their personal growth and development, and sort of defining, do we have the right people on the bus? Are they in the right seats? What are the needs we have as an organization? But primarily coaching and developing our senior folks.
Perfect. And I want to talk about having the right people on the bus, but can you provide some statistics or some numbers on DPR's size, whether it be revenue, number of employees, et cetera, to give folks an idea of the scale of DPR?
Sure. The scale and volume as a general contractor, we're pushing about $4 billion, about 2,000 salaried professionals, and maybe about 2,000 craft professionals throughout the United States.
And you have offices that look like in around 20 cities across the country. Does that sound about right?
Correct. Yeah, I like to think of it as the warm states around the perimeter, from Boston to Jersey, down to Florida, to Texas, to Arizona, up the California coast.
Gotcha. All right. So, question for you. You focus on talent development. You mentioned making sure you have the right people on the bus. So here's the question that a lot of people that I've asked a lot, and people have asked me as well, is how do you know when you've got the wrong person on the bus? What are some of the red flags or early indicators that people should look for to know that this is just the wrong person or they're on the wrong bus?
Yeah, that is a huge question everyone asks. And I look for different characteristics related to people skills. Again, my focus is more leaders, and leadership skills that are needed to be great leaders are people skills. So I look for indicators. Are people getting along with this person? Are they opening up? Are they building relationships with coworkers, those peers, those people they need to influence? To me, that's an indicator. The block and tackling stuff, people come with different backgrounds and different experience levels. So those They may make a mistake or two, but I'm more forgiving as it relates to they don't know our processes, they don't know our software. So in a short period of time, you can figure out that they're usually competent enough to figure those things out. I'm usually looking for more soft skills, communication abilities, the ability to sort of lead others or communicate to others is a huge key, whether it's giving direction or listening as part of communication. So it's the soft skills that I look for indicators to say, are they working or not working? Or it's the area that I need to coach them to start working on.
Okay, so if somebody in the audience were to, let's say you were brought in as a consultant, you were going to sit in on a meeting with one of their leaders, and they said, Guy, I'm not sure that this guy is right for our organization. I'm not sure he's right to be in leadership. I want you to sit on a meeting with his team and see how he interacts with his team, how he communicates, how he delegates, or how he doesn't delegate or communicate. What would be, if you had to put together a checklist of things that you wanted to assess or look for, what are some really specific things that you would look for to be able to assess someone's leadership ability?
So, I mean, the obvious, if you're sitting in a meeting, it's sort of body language with this individual, with the other people. Are people connected? Are they plugged in? Are they paying attention? Soft skills like that you can just see by observing. But then usually you can pick up if people are just giving, the political line and not explaining themselves, or even conducting a meeting or running a meeting. Are they engaged with the audience? If we're talking about, let's say, a project manager and he's conducting a staff meeting, is he addressing the needs of the individuals in the group? Meaning, a superintendent may want it a certain way. Is he communicating at a superintendent's competency level, and/or a young project engineer may need it a whole different way? Is he adapting sort of leadership skills to the individual, and/or picking up indicators that you can see maybe a young engineer is just lost with the topic at hand because he'd never done this before, or a superintendent's bored because we're talking about how to do an RFI that he has no interest in. And so some of it is just picking up on the communication style and characteristics of that individual running that meeting in that example. Gotcha.
Good advice. All right, so DPR is a very large company. You said approaching the neighborhood of $4 billion with a B in annual revenue. So a lot of the folks listening to this are subcontractors, and one of the questions I get often is, how can I develop relationships as a subcontractor to some of the larger firms? How can I get invited to bid on private projects so that I even have a shot? Because a lot of these guys they see projects going up, they don't have any idea how to get in, even how to get to the table or how to get an invitation. So what are some practical strategies or some pieces of advice you would give to subcontractors who would want to build a relationship with a company like DPR or other large contractors?
Yeah, great question. I think of things like, do they align with what we align with? Whether it be our culture, do they have similar culture? How's our core values align with their core values? But they also got to think about, we work for people too. So we've got to think really hard about how do we get work from an owner? What's our strategic edge? How do we get in? How do we align? What relationships do we have? What relationships do we need to build? What technologies does this particular owner or client like? And I think that transcends down to the sub-communities that if we consider ourselves a cutting-edge organization that a lot of technology usage, well, what technologies are you using that could benefit us, that you could bring to the table? Or you can be using the same technologies we're using, whether it be through our building information modeling or our BIM 360 or whatever tools we're using today. Are you learning about those? Are you growing yourself to adapt to what we see or we think the construction industry is going?
So you mentioned technology. What are some of the tools that the vast majority of contractors need to be looking at, whether it's BIM or potentially alternate delivery methods like IPD, lean construction methodology, the last planner system, et cetera. What are some tools like that that you would say are going to be standard operating procedure in the not too distant future?
Well, I think to keep it simple, you just mentioned them all. I think lean practices, IPD concepts, which has a lot to do with more collaborations. There's plenty of our customers that they want everything associated with an IPD except for the contract, which just means a lot of collaboration, a lot of early upfront stuff, helping an owner achieve what they need to achieve within their budgets. And I think adapting those same principles to a subcontractor is going to be key for them to get our attention, to know that we can hire them or think about them for the type of projects that we chase and go after. I think the other element that for subs coming into working for DPR Construction is similar to our owners that we work for, check out our financial stabilities. Well, we also want to work with subcontractors that have a financial stability. And so, one, know your business and know what the indicators are, know what a good business looks like, because we're going to check into that. So that's something that somebody immediately can do. And you can check out our website, dpr.com. There's a link on there to subcontractors can apply to our pre-qualification process. That basically, we want to work with good businesses just like owners want to work with good general contractors that are stable in their business.
Got it. Good advice. So if you were coaching a subcontractor on how to approach you, would you advise them to come to the table and say, these are the technologies that we're using, or would you advise them to approach DPR with a question? Hey, we want to work with you. What are the technologies that you're using that we should be using? What would be your advice on how to approach that?
Sure, and I think two different ways to look at that. One is if somebody's working for us, they get exposed to everything that we do already. And then I would say enhance your skills based on what you know. If you've never worked with us before, you don't have that exposure. So then I do think it is about questioning. Hey, what are the things you're doing? What are your things? What would you like if you're an electrical subcontractor? As electrical subcontractor, what at a very minimum should I be bringing to the table to show you that I'm a good contractor? So I think good questioning.
Good. That's good advice. Okay. What are some things, certainly not trade secrets or anything too specific, but what are some things that DPR does differently from others in the industry that you think are unique to DPR, whether it be in the way they deal with subcontractors, how they manage projects, deal with clients, et cetera, just some maybe different ways of looking at the business. Yeah, let's talk about that. So maybe what are some ways that DPR looks at the construction business differently than other contractors do? Does that make sense? Sure.
And I don't know that I have the perspective of what everyone else is doing, but I think our belief is sort of bringing the right people to the table is key to most of our success. And that right person doesn't mean necessarily gray hair. It's the right person for the job, a right person for the particular pursuit, a right person for the situation. And when you strip away gray hair or necessary years in the business, and you replace that with competent, passionate people, that shows, so that stands out. So I do think a differentiator for us is just our ability to trust, inspire, and take risk in a positive way on people and putting them in seats that they may not know they have the competency to, but will be proven over time is with some coaching and some monitoring. People rise to the occasion. The good people really step up and just literally rock. And we've proven that time after time after time. So I think differentiator is with internal. I think it's just growing people's careers and expediting them at their pace of growth, not a prescribed structure of growth. But if we got people that are growing quicker than others, we're going to continue to challenge them with bigger challenges from within. So I think from growing our people from within, I feel like that's something we strive to do maybe better than other people. I think externally, our ability to be nimble, even though we're a large general contractor, we really try to operate local general contracting businesses wherever we have an office. And that means we're adaptable to the local marketplace, and that if a certain customer wants a certain thing a certain way, we say, okay, We don't have this mandated corporate structure that we've got to push on everybody just because we're a big guy. I think we've got the flexibility to adapt and be nimble enough to adapt to whatever our customer needs are. And I think that for a company our size, that's often hard to do, and keeping this structure of entrepreneurial freedom with running a $4 billion company. But I do feel like we do that well.
Several questions came out of that. That was a loaded statement. First, I want to ask. I want to talk about age. You mentioned maybe it means gray hair, maybe it doesn't. So I want to talk about millennials, which is a hot topic these days. But first, what are some of the necessary ingredients to your company culture that allow people to rock, as you say? For what are the core ingredients of that company culture that allow the people to step into situations that are stretches for them and really shine?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things that come to mind. First is this belief that, which is part of our core, is who we build is as important as what we build, right? Who we build. And keeping that at the forefront, that's as much energy we put on putting projects together, are we taking equal amount of energy to grow individuals in that process? I think that's key. A couple elements within our culture is sort of respect the individual, trust them. Along with that, empower them to change the world. And those are big cliches, I get it, but when you get a whole population believing that, and different ways to demonstrate that, it's amazing what the results you really get.
So who you build is as important as what you build. So that's a big paradigm shift, because a lot of construction companies are about, maybe it's the project is the most important thing, and for some companies it's not, they're not that concerned about their projects. The projects are a means to an end, the people are a means to an end, it's about profits. Mm-hmm. So what does that really look like? Down at the tactical level, it sounds nice. It's a really nice statement. Who we build as important as what we build, but there's probably going to be, I can imagine, some situations where there's some tension between going in that direction of who we build is more important, and there's an opposite tension in the other direction, pulling away from that. So can you share some situations, or just general situations, of when there's maybe some tough conversations or some tension, and you really have to pull that statement back out? Sure. And review it?
Sure. And I would say it's not perfect, but more than not, that is sort of the trump card. And I think sometimes we evaluate the customers we work for. We've got a rigorous process to make sure we're aligning with the right customers. And some of that rigorous process is, do we have the staff to do it? And knowing that maybe we have to double up staff on 2 different projects, that might kill them because we're going to ask them to work too many hours. And I think the trump card is no, we're not going to do that to our person. We don't have the right staff for this project. We're going to politely pass, right? Or find a different group of people. So I think those conversations happen often, that we look at the bandwidth individuals have and sort of default to say, no, this isn't fair to that individual. Let's either find somebody else, or let's politely say we can't do it, we don't have the right staff available. So I think those conversations happen all the time, but it's not the statement that comes out of who we build is what we build. It's sort of the culture we've created we're going to think about that just like we think about every other element of the contract or the schedule. Let's think about the team and where they're at in their career. Maybe we got a young father or a mother on the team. We got to recognize that they're bad, maybe not as equal to somebody that don't have a young child at home. And so we do think about and have conversations, and it gets down to very tactical. Who we got in this team, or who we proposing on this project? Let's look at the cross section of that team. Do we have a good mix of people with the right experience for that opportunity? It's just part of the rigorous dialogue and discussion that goes into us pursuing, planning, and executing projects.
And it sounds like to me that one of the keys to your culture is the grow from within strategy. So can you share some of the pros and cons of a grow from within strategy as opposed to a hire from the outside growth strategy?
Sure. I think definitely our biggest success is growth from within and providing opportunities to those that we currently have. DPR has grown exponentially, and when you grow exponentially, you can't grow your own people, or you can't hire them fast enough to grow within the organization, because you still have to learn the basic skills. And so you do have to hire from the outside world. And that's mainly where a lot of my focus is, sort of adapting somebody that may have gotten 20 years of experience somewhere else. Not that that experience is bad, but how do I reshape it to just make it look more DPR-like and not like the process and procedures they've done somewhere else. And so some of that is defragging some of the maybe bad habits around that they picked up throughout the years from somewhere else, versus helping them understand how that same thing looks at DPR and how it should come out versus not. So I think there's difference from our biggest success is growth from within, and in that the challenge there is providing the opportunities as people grow and making sure we got enough opportunities for them to grow. Otherwise they get bored and stagnant and they go find a job somewhere else. And so that's a challenge in itself. And then the challenge of bringing people from the outside with experience to the organization is the cultural alignment, making sure that they can adapt to the cultural alignment, because we don't want a mix of people that we don't want our company looking like some other company because we hired them from there.
You don't want to dilute. You don't want to dilute your culture, right?
Correct.
So what are some of the things that you look at when you're interviewing someone from the outside? Maybe they have 15, 20 years of experience. What are some of the things, maybe they're either red flags, early indicators of whether good or bad, that you really look for when hiring someone to see if they're a cultural fit? How do you find that out? Do you have some questions you ask? Do you have a process to scrub them against?
Mm-hmm. So we do have a pretty rigorous interviewing process at DPR, and it's all by design of finding the right who's first. And so sometimes that can be lengthy. That can be many interviews with many different personalities, many different roles. But me personally, I try to break through. Most people that come in are interviewing, and they're used to interviewing, and they're prepared for standard interview questions. And so I'm usually asking off the wall questions I want to get to know who they are as a person. And what I'm looking for is sort of alignment with our core values: integrity, uniqueness, enjoyment, never forward. Are they demonstrating any of these skills and who they are as a person? Or can they tell me stories of, some unique or innovative way they've solved a problem in one of their projects, and how did they think outside the box? Or tell me why you enjoy this career, and what you do to continue that concept of enjoyment when you get busy on a project, and just hear what they have to say. So I'm looking for cultural alignment around our core values, sort of in the first interview. I'm starting to get to know them as a person.
So you mentioned you ask some off-the-wall questions. Can you share one or two of those off-the-wall questions you ask?
Sure. Sometimes I ask if their best friend was sitting in the room, and I got that best friend really, really drunk. What would they say about you? And so it's interesting. Sometimes they take the political road and say, oh, they say I'm fun and I'm friendly, and I'm like, yeah, no, they won't. They're drunk. Tell them, what would they really say about you? And so again, I'm just looking for. I don't really care what they have to say, but are they genuine, honest, and open about what this person would say? Just weird things like that, or maybe what are you passionate in life about and why? Mm-hmm. Different things that can't be scripted. Just again, I'm trying to get to know the person versus something they rehearsed.
All right. So do you hire for skill, character, or personality? Which would Which would be most important?
Personality aligning with our culture.
Okay.
Yeah. I think skills can be taught, skills can be learned, but if they don't have some of the at the core, some of our core values, I don't know that they fit.
Agreed. That's been my experience as well. I've had better luck hiring people with no experience, but good work ethic, good character, and teaching them the skills, rather than taking someone who has the skills or apparent skills and trying to retrain them. It's tough. It can be done, but it's tough. Either way has its pros and cons.
Yep.
So there's no silver bullet in my experience.
Correct. Yeah, some of our greatest leaders, I don't think of them as the most brilliant person, but they've got the charisma, the communication skill, the swagger, the style, the presence to know when to be humble and say I don't know, and to know when to get the right people around them to work through any situation at hand. So they don't have to be the smartest.
Well, that brings up a good question for the folks who aspire to senior leadership. Maybe it's a VP level or C-suite level in a company. What are some of you mentioned charisma, swagger, communication skills, soft skills. What are some of the tools that people need to pick up and put in their toolkit during their career as they work their way toward executive leadership? I mean, you said it's not all about technical acumen, but it's a lot of soft skills. So what would be some advice you would give to folks on how to develop those soft skills?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one is just self-awareness. Are you taking the time to sort of self-reflect, whether it be a day, this week, or this month, how did I do with giving direction or checking in or coaching somebody? How did I do with, am I spending my time wisely? Was it the best use of my time this week? So I think self-reflecting often can start understanding or seeing some patterns you have within yourself that maybe you are wasting your time on X, Y, or Z that you shouldn't be, and or you maybe sometimes our leaders saying, well, I said it, so therefore it's done and everyone gets it. And I think that's a mistake. It's, yes, you can say it, but if there's three people in the room, one might have got it, the other one is still clueless, and the other one doesn't like you because you said it. And sort of have you circle back to make sure your message got through, depending on what it is or what direction you need to you were giving. So I think sort of self-reflecting, I think, is critical along the journey. And part of that self-reflection is also a personal strategic plan. What do you want to be a year from now? How do you want to look or show up or competency level 1 year from now? What are those things, and what are you doing to work towards them? And so again, all about personal self-reflection of how you're doing, how you're leading, and sometimes you need to get feedback on those things, of course. But maybe reaching out for your own. Do you have your own mentors, and are you utilizing them? Are you using them effectively? I think just some characteristics that I think about.
So what I'm hearing you say is to be strategic, which would mean to have a plan instead of just letting the game come to you and taking an approach of, well, when there's an opportunity that comes up, I'll see if it fits and I'll develop my skills in those roles. That's one approach. The other approach, what I'm hearing you say, would be to decide where you want to be and then figure out the delta between where you are now and where you want to be, and then actively work on the skills that will get you to where you want to be. And I think that's a smart approach, and that's really what companies need. It's what people need. That's what companies need. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of companies just take a passive role to developing their people and don't focus on it at all. And as a result, their companies, their businesses, and their people struggle. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. And I think that too, sometimes I have to turn people around to help them understand that you really are in charge of your career, right? And you really need to take a leadership role in your career, and sort of define what you want to do, define what you're going to do to get there. and then communicate that and get feedback on that. But ultimately, you need to take ownership of that. And if you sit back and wait for those to come around, sure, maybe they'll come around, but don't be disappointed if they don't, because you didn't take an active role in pursuing them. And some of them, it's not an easy task sometimes of getting feedback and hearing things like, no, you don't have the competency for that yet, or no, you're not ready for that because of this skill you don't have. Well, those are great learning tools to say, now I got some skills and some tools and somewhere that I can start diving into and getting better at. But that's sort of taking ownership to your own career.
Yeah, and the self-awareness and accepting feedback, it's uncomfortable. I've heard the statement from there's a leadership development coach that did a seminar at a company I worked for. He said self-awareness is like hugging a porcupine. The closer you get, the more uncomfortable it becomes. So the people who are most comfortable are probably least aware, and the people who are aware of where their deficiencies are, where their opportunities for growth are, it's uncomfortable because you have to look that right in the face. But what I try to do is, because I've dealt with that in the past, when I received negative feedback early in my career, it hurt. I didn't like it. I wanted to disagree with it, but I try to remind myself that it's like a coach. And when my baseball coach would tell me something, hey, you gotta do this in this situation, I didn't get mad. He was telling me that because he wanted me to get better. So I think the right mindset and the right way to couch those tough conversations with feedback is to coach people, to let them know this is how you need to get better, this is what we need you to do to get better, and then you need to receive it as a player, as a coach giving you some advice.
Sure.
All right, so we touched on the topic of millennials a few minutes ago. Let's talk about that. So there's a lot of negative talk about millennials, and there's talk all over the board. Positive, negative, they're bad for business, they're the future of business, they're the only hope for business. So what are your thoughts? You're into people development, you're probably connected to that part of the world a lot better than most of us who are listening, or especially myself. So how should companies view millennials, and just what are your thoughts in general on the talk about millennials?
Sure. I do feel like millennials, the whole talk on millennials, it maybe got a bad rap. And again, I think we're focusing on the negative versus the positive. The generation, like every other generation, has some pros and cons. The boomers had it, Generation X had it. There's all these little quirks associated with upbringing and so forth, but I think the millennials have maybe got a bad rap. That this generation is brilliant, intelligent. They know what they want, which is awesome. I take that over somebody that doesn't know what they want to do for the rest of their life any day of the week. Does that mean we've got to tailor a little bit to how we deal with those situations? Sure, but I would say no different than we tailor to other generations. And so I think it's sort of we need to stop talking about the differences and start talking about the needs and sort of learning. I love spending time with some of our younger folks and just understanding, what makes them tick and what's going to get them excited. And as an employer, that's our job, to sort of keep them excited, keep them passionate, keep them growing. And when you figure that out, wow, just watch out. They are the future, not only by age, but it's amazing how many of those are stepping into, they're doing things with 5 years experience that took me 10. And they've got a tremendous amount of drive. And sort of another sort of data point, we do this annual employee satisfaction survey, which we ask all of our salary professionals to do and get a tremendous response rate. And so we dissect all this data. And when you start dissecting all this data, when you create a consistent culture, they don't treat people differently. The same challenges exist, whether it be some of our older folks, some of our boomers, to some of our new folks, and there's really not that big strata between one or the other.
Great advice. Quick question related to age. If you could go back in time and give the young Guy Sanders, say, when you were 25, if you could give 25-year-old Guy Sanders one piece of advice, either to do or not to do, what would that be?
Good question. I think it has to do with finding your passion. I felt like I was dabbling in the people world early on in my career. I wouldn't change anything in the past, but I wish I would have pursued doing more with this people world, this growth and development of individuals earlier on in my career. And inherently, what I was doing is telling myself stories that I don't know if they're willing to pay for this. My employer, I don't know if I don't know how people would react to this. And it's sort of get over those stories you tell yourself in your head, and follow your passion wherever it leads you. And whether that's in the construction industry, and when I coach some of our younger folks, it's, maybe I need to coach you out of this business, and I don't want to do that. But if your passion's not here, you only get one go around here. You got to find your passion and go pursue that. So I would probably have given myself that advice to, cut the chatter on the brain, and pursue your passion.
Very good advice. Very good advice. A few more questions for you. I want to be a good steward of your time. So here's a big question. What is one of the biggest challenges to the construction industry that people are not talking about enough today?
Good question. I mean, certainly there's a labor shortage or a skilled competency workforce shortage, but I think we're talking about that one now, but I think the byproduct of that is we're evolving, and I think our industry is evolving to adapt to less competent tradesmen, less competent workforce. Certainly there's things we got to do to promote that, but I don't think that's going to get fixed overnight. But I think that's forcing us to change our industry as it relates to doing more prefab, designing more prefabricated elements of a building or a whole building, or doing more building information modeling, so we can solve the challenges before they get out in the field, where we may not have the competency in the field to solve those. And so our industry, I feel like, is evolving a bit to compensate for the lack of competent, skilled tradesmen. We need to solve that. We can't do without them, but I think our industry's evolving.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I suppose you could say our industry has evolved to some degree as a result of that. Several hundred years ago, well, I look at 200-year-old buildings and the ornate masonry and stonework and marble columns and think, there's no way we could even do this. We couldn't afford it, much less we couldn't find people who could do that. So we're just continuing on this evolution toward less skilled labor. And I think that's great advice, looking toward prefabrication, better upfront modeling, and shifting the decision making and the key decision making, shifting that earlier in the process, so it's not so much on the shoulders of the folks in the field. Good advice. If you had an audience with a group of construction business owners, which you do, so imagine you're standing in front of 500 small construction business owners, and you could give them one piece of advice. What would that piece of advice be?
Just one?
Maybe two, if there's a couple of things
A couple of things come to mind. So one, I think we can never forget that people are our business, that we do need to build our small businesses, our big businesses, around people, and sort of surrounding ourselves with the right people, finding the right people. So I think there's a people element that you really got to start thinking about. And I think along with that is sort of being transparent, helping explain the why behind the directions or actions that you need done, or not just saying that's our mission for our company and just follow it, without helping people understand how we got here, or what it means, or what people are engaged. I truly believe there's a couple elements of why employees, or how employees feel, can feel success. So I think one is, employees feeling respected or trusted. Two, I think people feeling like they have a future with your organization or with the company. And I think three, people generally feeling like they're taking part in a greater purpose, that I'm not doing this because my boss just told me to. I'm doing it because I bought into why we took this project to build this hospital for that client, to save lives, is sort of part of helping your employees be part of a greater purpose or cause. So I know that was more than one thing, but some thoughts.
No, I think that's great advice, and I've seen a lot of research, a lot of science behind the statement that people will engage in a plan better and more fully when they understand the why behind it. Simon Sinek has explored that topic a lot with Start With Why, and the power of people understanding the why behind what they're doing. It just, people are fully engaged. It's not new age, it's not HR mumbo jumbo, it's science, and it's human psychology. So I think that's great. Last question for you. What is one piece of really actionable tactical advice that everybody who's listening to this should take this week to make themselves a better leader or business owner, or simply just a better person?
Listen more. I think often we have our own agendas, our own thoughts, our own beliefs, and we don't stop and listen enough. Whether you're hearing somebody regurgitate what you said, or hearing somebody's got a challenge or a problem, or really listening to connect to people. So I think just listen more. Listen more. It's good advice. Very simple, but very powerful. Well, Guy, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. If people want to connect with you, whether it be on social media or any way, if people want to connect with you, whether they want to ask questions or get in contact with you, what's the best way or the best place they can go to do that? Sure. Be happy to help out whoever needs whatever they need that I can help with. So my email address is guys@dpr.com, or you can check out DPR's address, dpr.com. There's all kinds of information about our company that could help people understand who we are and what we stand for. Excellent. Well, I appreciate your willingness to answer questions. So, listeners, if you have questions for Guy, send him an email. He's been kind enough to provide that. So again, Guy, thanks so much for sharing. Thanks for taking the time to do this, and let me know if there's ever anything I could do for you in the future. Great. Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed that interview, and I would encourage you, if you did get something out of that, reach out to Guy, let him know, shoot me an email. Also, Todd@Construction Leading Edge. Love to hear from you. And as always, you can go to constructionleadingedge.com/043 for the show notes and some of the links and resources we talked about in this episode. If you want to join the Construction Leading Edge Nation and get on an email list to receive insider tips and keep up with what's going on over here at Construction Leading Edge, go to constructionleadingedge.com/nation, or just go to the homepage, click on the big green button that says join the Construction Leading Edge Nation. Or if you have any questions, or if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, Todd@constructionleadingedge.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.